crafters, welcome back to my channel, Margaret Knob Designs, and I am back with my second project working on the 12 by 12 Hello Pumpkin patterns and solids, as well as the 12 by 12 collection. So I'm going to be utilizing both of those packages. They are from my design team package from Country Craft Creations. And so make sure you run over there to see if there is still more left. I know that it's been going fast because there's been so many beautiful projects out there using this collection. So please hop out there and take a look, and I hope you can join me with making this new project. So I'm going to start off by talking about the project and what I'm planning on doing. And as you can see here, I have an album. And I'm going to be doing album this time with hinges. So in order to make this or cover the album, I will put a link in the description box below about how to make this kind of an album, but I'm going to give you the measurements for this album. So your front and back covers, I have this written down, your front and back covers are 7.5 by 9. Those are two pieces of chipboard, 7.5 by 9, and then your spine is 2 inches by 9. So that's for your chipboard. Now for this you can use the heavyweight chipboard or the lightweight chipboard, because we're going to be doing some double matting as we go. So for this then, the cardstock that I use to cover this the chipboard is you're going to cut that on the covers 1 inch larger. So for the cardstock you need for this part 9.5 by 11. So that'll give you a large enough piece of cardstock to cover this piece of chipboard, and then you'll need another one for this side. So that'll be 9.5 by 11. And then to cover the spine, we measure that just a little bit differently. It's going to be an inch on either end, and so this is going to be 11 inches. But in the center here, because we do the margin by, I do by 1.5, that I need to add 3 inches onto that. So my cardstock for covering my spine is going to be 5 inches by 11 inches. So that is your cardstock measurements. These will also be written down in the description below if you didn't catch all of those, but otherwise you can listen again. So one of the things that I like to do, and I talk about in my videos quite frequently, is I like to do my covers first and my spine first, but also getting my hinges in and then cutting my pages for my journal. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you how I'm doing the hinges for this. I do have a video about making hinges, but I'm going to show you again here what I've decided to do. So our spine is 2 inches. So I want to make sure that my spine fits for this. So what I ended up doing was cutting a piece of cardstock, the black cardstock, and I cut the cardstock 9 inches by 8 5/8. So I cut this by 8 5/8 in the height and 9 inches going across. Now some people don't like to have this extra piece here. I have 1.5 inches extra here with 1/4 inch right here. So really it's 1 3/4 if you want to count it that way. But I'll show you why I did it this way. So what we're going to do is, again, it is 8 5/8, and it can be a little confusing because we're going to 9 inches for the width of it, but the shorter piece is up and down because I wanted it a little bit shorter than what my pages are going to be, and matching them up, getting on the hinges so that they're not too tight on those hinges. So what we're going to do then, I took a 9-inch piece of this cardstock. What I ended up doing is that I'm going to have 1/4 inch fold or space from my cover to my first hinge, because I find that the covers often give you a lot more space than what you're expecting. So what I did to help myself, it's not that you have to do it, is I come in here and I know I did 1.5 inches. I wanted 1.5 inches extra on my hinge. So I go in and I measure and I score 1.5 inches. And then I wanted to have from that extra piece of paper, I wanted to have 1/4 inch, so that from my hinge to my front cover, I have 1/4 inch. So I'm going to score down at 1 3/4 inch. And then I need to make my first set of hinges. So our hinges are always 1/2 inch. So putting 1/2 and 1/2 together, it makes it 1 inch. So we're going to go from 3/4 inch to 1/4. So it's 2 1/4. I'm going to score down that. And then from 2 1/4 to 2 3/4, because that's 1/2 inch there. Then I need, between my hinges, I need to go another 1/2 inch, because in the middle of the book, I want to have 1/2 inch between each page. So I'm going to, I scored at 3/4, then I went to 3 1/4, and now I'm going to score at 3 3/4 and score down. Another 1/2 inch, I'm going to go score at 4 1/4. Another 1/2 inch, I'm going to go at 4 3/4. Another 1/2 inch, I'm going to go to 5 1/4. Next 1/2 inch, I'm going to go 4 3/4. Oops, wait, I'm off here, sorry. 4 1/4. And I'm going to 5 3/4. Then I'm going to go over to 6 1/4 to 6 1/4 to 6 3/4 to 7 1/4 to 7 1/2 is our last. We're going to go from 7 1/4 to 7 1/2, so it's 1/4 inch. And I know it's really hard to see that on here because of the black, but if you take and even, you know, put a white piece of paper down on your scoreboard and then just mark where those should be, it'll help you to visualize a little better how you want the hinge to look. So the reason why I'm going to try to bring this up to see if you can see this, I have 1/4 inch, but I want this in here because I want to, for myself, to be able to put this 1/4 inch hinge. I want to put that on my edge of my spine going into my cover so that it makes it a little bit clear for me. So again, this was cut at 8 5/8 by 9. And then that gives us leeway so that we then can put the pages on, allowing for a little bit shorter of a page than the cover. So what I do is I then go along and I fold in all my pieces. Even on the quarter inch, I even folded on that in there. And what I'm going to do is go back then, and I know a lot of people will use tape. I just use my glue. It works just fine. And I just like my art glitter glue, and I feel that I'm most successful with that. And it's a heck of a lot easier to put this all together with glue than it is with all that tape. Plus, in the long run, I think it's less expensive. So there we've got our first hinge done. And I'm going to continue to fold these back and forth so that I get them to be very foldable. I'm going to go back and glue this other one. One thing someone taught me when I first started with doing hinges, because sometimes for a beginner doing hinges is very confusing, like what's the hinge, what's the space. I believe it was Genevieve Designs. She was showing how to do a hinge in notebook or mini album. And what she always had us do when she was doing it, she would X the two spots for, so like if I came along here, I would X this, and I didn't X my space. So I would define it by the X's that I had, so I knew it had to go together. So I thought that was a good trick, especially for beginners, because it can be really confusing putting hinges together. The other thing that I show you in my video about doing hinges, I show you my method for how I figure out how big or how, you know, how much paper I need to cut for my hinge. So that'll go into more depth about that. Go. We've got our 4 hinges, and my plan is with my 4 hinges, I have a 1/2 inch between each one that's in the center of the book, and I have a 1/4 of an inch here and a 1/4 of an inch here, so that I have a little bit of leeway to the cover, but not quite a 1/2 inch, because it might give me too much. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to actually cut on my hinges. I like to miter them. It's just to help when I'm putting the pages on. So I just take and miter each one of these. On both ends. So here's all our snippets. Then once I have all of those, all of the hinges done, I'm going to go back again and I'm going to fold these again and just try to make them as loose as possible without breaking my paper. But I am using the black artisan cardstock, and I've had much success with that cardstock not cracking. You just have to be careful that if you live in a really dry climate, to keep your cardstock in an area that it would do fine with the drier climate. So my goal is to try to fit this hinge. I know you're going to have a tough time seeing this, but I want to put this into the middle so that my 1/4 of an inch, and that's why I scored it, so I could see where it's going to the 2 inches of my hinge, and then I want to center it between top and bottom, as well as side by side, so that I have this even. And you know, if you're a little bit off on that side by side, it's perfectly okay. Just do the best that you can do, and if you have struggles with it, then I'm sure it'll be fine in the long run. You know, these are handmade items, so that they're not perfect. And I tell you that even items that are made in factories or stores or whatever, they're not perfect either. So give yourself a bit of grace. And I call those my creative opportunities. So I'm going to try to center that there, up and down, and sideways. I think I got it pretty good, but if I don't, oh well. And then I glue that down onto there. Some of you might ask why I use glue instead of tape. I read an article, I'm not saying that this is my fact, but in the article that I read that glue actually lasts better or longer than tape, because tape has a tendency to dry out, where glue actually connects and bonds with the fibers of the paper and will last longer. I don't know if it'll last forever, but it'll last longer. That's what I read or Googled, and I Googled a lot of different things. I went to a lot of different articles to try to find out which is better, the tape or the glue. Now, when I make my album covers, I do use tape underneath this cardstock. And the reason why I use the big sheets of tape on here, so you can get those sheets from Country Craft Creations, I use them because they make a beautiful finish. It's just flawless if you get that tape down nice and clean. So I would always suggest to use tape on those. So I'm going to work on this hinge a little bit and just try to bend this in. But because I scored on that, it's not going to be quite as difficult for bending in that hinge. So I want to make sure that I get those, as they say, nice and bendable. But because that's part of the reason why I scored. So to make that a little bit easier. And there we go, we've got our hinges in. So the next thing that I normally do on my albums is I like to pick out my papers for the front cover and the back cover and go from there. And the reason why I like to do that is because I just like to designate which items are going to be for the cover, because I always feel like the cover is the first thing that you're going to see. So for this album, I decided that I wanted to do a plaid on the cover, and I am double matting this. And I'm double matting it with the first mat is the Patterns and Solids. It's the back of this pumpkin one. It's just the solid paper. And that's also why I was saying that you could use lightweight chipboard, because we're putting double matting down. I'm not sure if I'm going to double mat on the inside, but on the outside I'm double matting. So our first mat, because our covers measure 7.5 by 9, so for the cardstock, not the cardstock, but the solid pattern paper, I'm going to cut the first layer is going to be cut at 7 3/8 by 8 7/8. That's the first layer, the purple one. The second one is then cut at 7 1/8 by 8 5/8. And you're going to need 2 of those. So that again was, the first one is 7 3/8 by 8 7/8. And then the second one is 7 1/8 by 8 5/8. So I usually glue the 2 together, and then I lay them down onto my cover, leaving about 1/8 of an inch away from the sides of the edge of my design. So I'm putting that down there. And then I know that this is the pattern paper that I wanted to use. My other one that I did was a little bit of a busier cover, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do on the cover yet. I just thought it would be a good choice to do something a little bit more plain. Not sure what I'm going to be doing, but we'll see when we get there. So I'm going to put this down. Be careful that I'm getting this side by side and up and down as well. I should say that if you're going to put a ribbon on this album, you really should put it on here underneath this paper. I'm not sure I'm going to put a ribbon on this album, so I will modify it. I may end up punching a hole in here to tie the ribbon around, or doing something a little bit different. So then we also will go to our back cover. So I wanted to do something a little bit more fancy with my back cover, just because that's normally what I just I don't put anything normally on the back cover, just maybe a tag or something like that. So thought I'd put a little bit more of a pattern paper on the back. But you know, that's your choice. I just like to pick it out ahead of time so I know that it's committed for that, and it's what I want to see on the outside of the album. There we go. And then we're going to do our spine. And the spine, I actually double layered as well. You can't see it as well because it blends in quite a bit with this pattern paper. And I used the same paper as this, took one of the cutoffs of that. And so our spine is 2 inches by 9. So the pattern paper for the spine, the solid one, was measured at 1 7/8 by 8 7/8. So basically you're going to see that I go 1/8 lower for each level of the paper. This one I might have gone even a little bit more because I wanted to see a little bit more of the purple. So if you want to see a little bit more of the purple, then you can drop it down like 1/16 or 1/32 of an inch. But for measurements and for putting the papers down, I'm giving you what I standardly do. So the solid is 1 7/8 by 8 7/8. And then the pattern paper was cut at 1 3/4 by 8 3/4. So that matches on there, and so we're going to go ahead and glue this one down. The other thing is I really I love this purple in the collection. It's not that I'm a huge purple girl, it's just for fall, for some reason, I think that color of purple always looks so good with the orange and the rusty colors of the season. So I wanted to bring out a little bit more of the purple. All right, so then we have our covers done. You can see that that's the spine, and we've got our back. And then the next thing that I will work on probably is the inside of these covers and cut the pages for this album. So I'm going to get the rest of those items ready, and I will be back once I come back to get the pages in the album, and we will do that together and maybe even get some of the inside of this done. But thanks for watching, and I'll be back in a few minutes. Bye-bye.